Testing captions. Testing captions.
It's good to see you all. I'm Malika Kapoor. I'm the Deputy Editor of Bloomberg Live Experiences. Welcome to Afternoon Tea at Bloomberg. Now, you may know that at Bloomberg, we are known for our pantries. So if you haven't gotten a cup of tea or coffee at some stage this evening, make sure you do go to our pantry and get yourself a cup of tea or coffee. We're really happy you can be with us at Bloomberg House. If some of you were here yesterday, thank you for coming back. Those of you who are here for the first time, I hope you like this beautiful space, and welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute, and we have a terrific program for you this evening. I do want to point out that at 5 p.m. this evening, we are going to join the Pride on the Promenade Rainbow Light Up campaign. That's at 5 p.m. this evening. So if you see, we're going to do that by lighting up our house. So if you see the lights change at 5, you know exactly what's going on. So in a few minutes, you will hear from Nikolai Coster-Waldau. You might know him from Game of Thrones. He's also the host of a Bloomberg series, An Optimist's Guide to the Planet. Thank you for being here with us today. And you'll hear from Mark Carney after that. But before that, we are going to begin with an exciting conversation, an important conversation which really looks at the power of individual action to create change on a local scale and on a global scale. So please join me in welcoming Nomzamo Mobatha, actress, humanitarian, and global citizen ambassador, and the founder and co-founder and CEO of Global Citizen, Hugh Evans. Hi, welcome, please.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Welcome, both of you.
Hi.
Thank you for
being here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Malika.
Hugh, I want to begin with you. You're a regular at Davos. You and I have talked in Davos before. What's your ask of the Davos community this year?
Well, this year, and firstly, thank you, Malika, and thank you to Bloomberg for having us. It's really an honor to be with you today. And Global Citizen, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the world's largest movement of citizens taking action for the eradication of extreme poverty within our lifetime. So for the last several years, we've taken a step back regarding our work on the continent of Africa. And we've asked ourselves, how do we not just do big one-off events? For example, a few years ago, we took Beyonce and Jay-Z to South Africa, and obviously it became a worldwide event when it was the first time they'd performed on the continent together. But this year we took a step back and we said, we don't want to do one-offs like that. We want to build something sustained. And so this year we announced the launch of Move Africa, a 5-year commitment to go north, south, east, and west Africa across the continent. And a few moments ago, with President Paul Kagame of Rwanda and President Akufo-Addo of Ghana, we announced that we are taking Global Citizen to both Kigali, Rwanda, as well as Ghana, West Africa, this coming year. And where our ask is really for people to invest in the continent. We believe that the way to ultimately alleviate poverty, in addition to obviously investment in health and education, water and sanitation, is people need jobs. And you can't have jobs without investment. And so our ask is really to encourage people to focus on the economic potential of Africa and really work with us in Global Citizen to support the creative economy. Because the world's greatest artists want to do more on the continent, and our job is to work in partnership with government to create the infrastructure to make that possible.
And we have great artists in the room with us today, for which we are grateful. Nomzamo, you are an actress. People have seen you in Coming to America, in Assassin. You're an activist, a humanitarian, a UN ambassador, a global citizen ambassador. What is the through line between your advocacy and your career as an actress?
Wow. I think what I always try and reiterate to everyone who always wonders what the purpose is just to know that I want to stand up for something that's much greater than myself. I want to be a mirror, a for the atrocities that continue to happen around the world in the middle of the glitz and the glam, because most people come to social media and they want to see what Nomzamo's wearing. And you'll find that, but most importantly, you'll find me doing activist work. I think for me, it's really just to continue to highlight who we are as a continent, that it's not a destitute continent, to change the narrative of the African continent. Because for so long, we're seen as the continent where there's not a lot of investor confidence. But here's the thing, we have so many young people who are incredibly skilled. They just need the opportunities. And for the longest time as well, we want to be able to say that it's not about watering other pastures, because it's very easy for me to just live in Hollywood and chase the Hollywood dream without taking what I learn in Hollywood and taking it back to the continent so that I can cultivate a economy that's going to be able to last for decades to come. Hugh mentions when we talk about how even Move Africa came about, you look at global artists who say, I'm going on a world tour. They go everywhere but the continent, which does not make sense. Which doesn't make sense. So for me, it's really just to be able to lift the lid of invisibility when it comes to the potential that we have as a continent.
And I do want to point out that we would love to hear from you. So if you have questions, you can scan the QR code you'll see in a minute, and do send your questions, and we'll try to get to as many of them as you can.
No tough questions.
But Hugh, I want to ask you, can you just remind the audience how Global Citizen works? How can every person in this room, anyone listening in, how do they get involved?
Well, Global Citizen is a movement of citizens. We're the world's largest advocacy organization for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And it all starts, and I can see many of you are on your phone, that lady there who's on her phone. Have you downloaded the Global Citizen app? It all starts with the app. So if you haven't, you can download the app and you start taking action. It's all gamified, because we realize that no amount of black tie gala dinners will ever be enough to eradicate extreme poverty. We could run gala dinners every year and raise millions of dollars, but we're talking about a $3.5 trillion challenge that is extreme poverty. And so we need to think differently. We need to raise billions of dollars in capital. How do you do that? You need a movement of citizens to call on world leaders and make multi-billion-dollar pledges. And so that's why Global Citizen has grown to have 12 million members around the world. All of those members take action in unison, and they call on world leaders to make commitments. And on our stage in the last 10 years, over $46 billion has been pledged to impact the lives of over 1 billion people on the planet. But we don't take those pledges for granted. We then track those pledges, and we hold those world leaders' feet to the fire, exactly, to make sure they follow through on those pledges. And I'm proud to say that 97% of every pledge that's been made on a Global Citizen stage has now been fulfilled.
And this last year, you had, 5 million actions which led to pledges. What were some of these actions? What did people do?
Yeah, so one example was last year here at the World Economic Forum, President Macron of France announced that he was going to host a campaign around global economic reform in Paris. And so together with artists like Billie Eilish and Lenny Kravitz, Global Citizen went to Paris in June alongside President Macron's summit. And we hosted 25,000 of our members in front of the Eiffel Tower. And we called specifically for one ask. We wanted the World Bank with the new president, Ajay Banga.
Who's coming here tomorrow.
Good.
Yes.
Then you can congratulate him on about what I'm about to tell you. So he got up on stage as his first ever public commitment on our stage, and he announced what are called debt pause clauses. This sounds really nerdy, but I'll just break it down. It's really powerful. He said that when a country is hit by a natural disaster, as often happens due to climate change, no fault of their own, they shouldn't have to repay debt during that period of time. It should be suspended. And they should be allowed to deploy that money on rebuilding all of their critical infrastructure, right?
Right.
And so he announced that, and now all of the other multilateral development banks have followed his lead and have already unlocked this year alone over $8 billion in capital to focus on development. And this was really an initiative spearheaded by the president of Barbados, Mia Mottley. She came together with an initiative called the Bridgetown Initiative that Global Citizen was part of. We were so inspired by her leadership that we said, let's rally Global Citizens. So 1.2 million Global Citizens took action. Ajay Banga said that his phone blew up, his Twitter blew up. He'd never seen so many actions on a single issue. And so he decided to make this announcement, and we're really proud that he did.
Yeah. That's absolutely amazing. Just a reminder, we define extreme poverty as someone living below $2.15 a day.
Yeah.
Is that right? That's a World Bank definition.
It's based on, it's adjusted for purchasing power parity, so depending on how much, but it's roughly $1.90 per day, correct.
So how is Move Africa, which I know everyone's very excited about, but how is Move Africa going to help you towards your mission of eradicating extreme poverty?
Well, there's going to be a lot of job creation. There's going to be a lot of skills transfer, because what we found is that a lot of the global artists would say that there's not enough infrastructure when they want to go and tour the African continent. So what does that look like? It looks like machinery, it's like equipment, things that have to be flown in. So as global citizens, we're saying that we want to be able to eradicate that, to stand in the gap of that. How do we get the infrastructure that the global artists need? How do we be able to build a lasting economy? So the skills development as well aspect of it is the fact that, there's a lot of people that have to fly in. Because there's not a lot of people who are skilled enough to be able to carry out certain, things on the ground. And so we want to be able to transfer those skills to a lot of young people on the ground. I mean, at Move Africa Kigali, there was 1,000 youth that were employed during that time, which is a very sizable number for a concert. So for us, it's really just to be able to do that. And I think, anything else?
No, I think you said it perfectly. I think that when you think about the power of the creative economy, there's so many jobs that are created through the creative economy. You create ticketing jobs, you create staging, lighting, sound, production, you create all aspects of creativity. And that should all, as Nomzamo said so eloquently, live on the continent. Yeah. We shouldn't have to bring it in from Dubai or bring it in from Europe. It should all live in Kigali or in Ghana or in Botswana. It should live there. And so that's the only way to do that, is to transfer those skills. So we've set ourselves a goal. In the next 5 years, we don't want to bring any producers from North America or Europe. We want all of those producers to be local.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said as well when we truly build a legacy of something, to know that it will always exist on its own. Because it's nothing. Absolutely. It has to be durable. It has to be self-sustaining, so that it's never at the beckoning call of anything else but of itself.
Now, trying to eradicate extreme poverty, it requires tackling a very complex web of income, of employment, of education, of health. Tell me about education. I know that that's really important to you personally, and you have your own foundation, the Lighthouse Foundation, which is all about education. Yeah. Have you started to see any change when it comes to education?
Absolutely. I think the main thing for us is really to build schools. And when you build schools or give uniforms to kids, and you're putting brand new school shoes on a kid who's been walking to school barefoot, there's a restoration of dignity there.
Yes.
There's a pride. There's an excitement to go to school because we have fresh walls. I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but when we had fresh paint in our classrooms, we were excited, like math class, oh my goodness, and no one was excited for maths, right? But it's really just about to really invigorate the excitement for kids, for them to be able to also be motivated to go to school. So we've seen a huge influx when it comes to young girls, especially because, young girls in your West Africa and not West Africa, in Central Africa, are used as weapons of war.
Yes.
They're kept at home.
Yes.
Mothers still don't see the value of education. So in the SADC region, it's a different story. There's different motivations for young girls. So we want to be able to continue to build more schools. The infrastructure is very important. Quality education as well, but also the fourth industrial revolution, which is what the world is in right now. Kids need to be in a specialized classroom so that they can be equal contenders when they go to the universities, whether they go to the Ivy Leagues of the world or even universities on the African continent. They have to be equal players in the classroom alongside their other counterparts who may have gone to private schools. So it's quite a complex situation, but it's not impossible. It's hard, but it's not impossible. We have to come up with creative and innovative ideas on how to transform the schooling systems across the continent, and that's what we're doing. But of course, there's also the eradication of debt. A lot of students, as is on a global scale, are faced with a lot of student debt. And I'm a firm believer in using all my networks. And I'm a spokesmodel and a brand ambassador for all these fancy brands. And they all know that if we're going to have Nomzamo on board to be our face and hold the cream up, we got to give her money to go eradicate student debt.
Well done.
So it's really just using the power of my networks and the power of collaboration as well, because you find that a lot of private sector wants to do good. In fact, even philanthropy, even very wealthy individuals, they want to do good. Sometimes they just don't know how to. And I have all the creative ideas on how to save the planet.
Well, talking about saving the planet, I mean, education, income generation, education, that's been very important to you, but I know that climate is now very important to you at Global Citizen. And this evening we are going to focus on climate issues here at Bloomberg House. So tell us about how Global Citizen is approaching climate.
Well, we had a very active delegation at the COP negotiations, and we've taken very seriously the question of, because obviously climate is about inputs and outputs, right? You need to make sure that corporations commit to the race to zero, and we had many of the world's largest corporations stand on stage at Global Citizen and announce their commitments to halve their carbon emissions by 2030 and become net zero by 2050. So we had Amex, Starbucks, Cisco, so many of the world's largest corporations chose the Global Citizen stage to make that announcement. But we also need to commit to ultimately ensuring that countries reduce their carbon emissions overall and stop polluting. I'd say that the transition and the announcement away from fossil fuels that was made at COP was a step in the right direction. The thing it didn't have was any measurability, right? They said we're going to transition away with no specific time-bound target. If you can't measure it, you can't achieve it.
Right.
And so I believe that the next step is not just nice sentiments around moving away from fossil fuels, but actually the complete eradication of fossil fuels in time. And you can see a great example here in Europe. Europe just recently surpassed more energy generated from wind turbines than from coal. A phenomenal achievement, just from wind, not to mention solar and others. Just wind surpassed coal. It is possible. We often think that, okay, we're going to need to have dirty coal our entire lives. It's just not true. We've got to change the way subsidies work, and I would call immediately on the World Bank to halt any of their fossil fuel subsidies and divert them towards clean energy, because Europe's already proven it is possible. I come from Australia. We have so much natural sunlight. We could be the solar power energy provider for the world. And so let's invest, and already state governments like South Australia are already doing just that. They partnered with Elon Musk to achieve that outcome. It is possible. We just need visionary leadership. Yeah. So my call to every head of state would be stop subsidizing fossil fuels, divest from fossil fuels in your pension funds, and focus much more on a transition to clean energy. Europe has done it. We all can do it.
Yeah. Now, the last couple of years, we've had successive economic shocks. We've had the pandemic. Pandemic pushed over 100 more million people into poverty. It's hard to be optimistic about ending extreme poverty, and yet you guys seem to be convinced that you can. I mean, we're only a couple of years away from the UN Sustainable Goals target. 2030 is not that far. And are you optimistic?
I am.
What makes you so? I mean, everything else is, the data doesn't make us optimistic, but you are, so.
I am optimistic, and there's so many funds that exist in this world, but they're so misplaced. And I think if we as the human race, as citizens, as ordinary citizens, hold government, hold private sector accountable to, because the thing about private sector is that it wouldn't exist without people.
Right.
So the very people that fund this, or the very people that grow these huge economies, are the very people that you owe so much to as well. So I think I am optimistic in that sense. Yeah.
Are you as optimistic?
Well, I think if you consider the narrative arc of poverty alleviation, in 1983 when I was born, 52% of the planet lived in extreme poverty, and prior to the pandemic, that was down to less than 12% of the world's population. So more than halved within my lifetime. And then you had shock after shock after shock, as you said, economic. You had health shock, climate shock, so on and so forth. So of course right now the data is not in our
favor.
In our favor, exactly. But I also believe that if you create a situation where you have a self-fulfilling prophecy, that's exactly what will happen. I'm always inspired by the leaders in history who took on the biggest challenges. Two leaders come to mind, and they both started when they were super young. William Wilberforce, he was 26 years old when he joined Parliament in the UK and worked for the abolition of the slave trade. He worked for 27 years, and 3 days before he died in 1833, finally slavery was abolished in Britain. And similarly, Nelson Mandela was only 18 years old when he worked to ultimately try to end apartheid in South Africa. And after spending years and years in prison, he saw that as a reality. So if we don't believe that we could envision a world extreme poverty, of course it's not going to happen.
Right.
But I think everyone in this room and everyone that subscribes to Bloomberg, you're here because you are optimists. You believe in a world that is possible, that's better, otherwise you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have to hold on to. That fact that data has been on our side and we've got to get it back on our side again.
It's great to end on a note of optimism. Nomzama, Hugh, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Of course. You can step out.
I think I'm melting. Let's go to a cooler place, huh?
It is worrying because sometimes you just feel like you can't do anything about it, being just little you.
It breaks your heart and you think, oh my God, what are we doing?
How can we make tomorrow better than yesterday?
You can't waste any more time.
It's our all hands on deck moment.
Around the world, people are working for a better tomorrow.
What we're doing is mind-blowing.
So this would be a carbon neutral jet fuel.
We grow vegetables, but to me, we give life.
I believe when history is written and we look back at this moment in time, this will be when we started to transform the way we live to inform the future we want.
A little worm that can actually dissolve plastic.
In my architecture, I harmonize people with nature.
Creating clouds, this is the definition of thinking outside the box.
This show is about solutions and the people behind them.
I'm optimistic we will be able to preserve the natural beauties of the world.
Jamie Lannister on the Roomba. Call it a year, I'm done.
My name is Nikolai Coster-Waldau, and this is an Optimist's Guide to the Planet.
You're smiling. You like this, don't you?
Hello?
Hello. Nikolai.
I just remember this morning my wife said your socks are very, very green, and I suddenly noticed when I saw the others.
It's the warning and the solution, orange and green.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Well, welcome, Nikolai Coster-Waldau.
Thank you.
There are many fans here who've watched Game of Thrones who know you as Jamie Lannister. I have not watched Game of Thrones. And I was chosen, just like your wife. So the two people in the world who haven't. And they thought a hard-nosed interview could only be done by somebody who's not watched the show. So,
makes sense.
But I would like to start with the Game of Thrones because I did get a summary of what the show is.
Okay.
And there is, weirdly, a climate angle to it. There's winter is coming, and the people there are fighting among themselves, aren't really looking out for the disaster that's coming their way.
Yeah.
I'm going to stretch that a little bit, but we live in a world where climate change, we used to fight about whether it's a real thing and we should do something about it, and now we fight about solutions.
Yeah.
If we stretch the allegory, do you see what's happening in the world today playing out in a way that it did in the Game of Thrones?
No. I I don't know. I understand you're not the first one who's made that, oh, they're just fighting, the real danger's out there. And I think that the whole discussion whether climate change is real or not, or if it's man-made or not, it's kind of, we're way past that.
Yes.
I mean, there might be some pockets of resistance. That's okay. People can have whatever beliefs, but I think there's a real consensus that, of course, we know we have to take action, and action is being taken.
Yeah.
Is it happening fast enough? No. But one of the reasons that I wanted to make this show was because I was a Goodwill ambassador. I've been a Goodwill ambassador for the UNDP since 2016, and I was traveling around, been very lucky to travel around the world. And I've seen people in the most dire of circumstances have incredible optimism, incredible will to make tomorrow better than today. And then when you then go back and you want to tell that story, it very often gets caught up in the drama, in the horror, in the danger. And I think that I was like, we need also to tell the story that it is happening. We just saw when they spoke about like ending poverty. Yeah. Yes, it's true. If you just look 3 years back, we haven't gone in the right direction. But as you also know with climate and with graphs, you have to look at data of decades. And decades, we like on every parameter when it comes to extreme poverty, gender equality, access to education, we are doing so much better. Climate, we need to take action. We need to move fast.
Now, you
say, because with Bloomberg, I should have said that to begin with. I'm really grateful to be here, to be invited here to Davos, and to show you a little tease, this show that opens in
right, and the Optimist Guide to the Planet is going to start streaming on 8th of February. It's 6 episodes. You traveled around the world. You went from Kenya to Australia, from Greenland to Vietnam to try and find these solutions, to try and highlight where progress is happening.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about those solutions, but before we get there, as a storyteller, I'm a journalist for Bloomberg Green. We write about solutions. As a storyteller, you are a writer, actor, producer, while being a Goodwill ambassador. Dystopia is an easy story to tell. I have a quote from Kim Stanley Robinson, who's a science fiction author. He says, "Disaster stories are too easy. It's a kind of a comfort food when we imagine situations worse than ours and then rest comfortably that we are not that bad." There's tension, you can throw in killing and sex, and it makes for interesting storytelling. Solution stories or utopian stories are much harder because it's about process. These people are working years in, years out on solutions that are in their own way small development. They only add up when it's a big picture, when you step back.
Yeah.
But those stories are hard to tell. So when you were trying to make this show, what was your challenge?
Well, for me, it is about solutions, but really it's about people. And that's my whole thing, because I think the biggest resource we have is us. It's like, and sometimes it's just surprising when people are like, we're never going to do this, and you go to any, look around in this room and look at every little thing. Somebody came up with a way to make this. Like, it's not that long ago we were just running around, trying to, crack each other over the head with a I don't know what rock. We can create everything. So, but to answer your question, it was actually, we traveled all over the world, but there was this moment I was here in Switzerland actually at this hydro power plant, which is I forget the name, close to Lausanne, but it had this built-in battery basically. So one of the big problems, of course, we have with renewables is that when the sun is shining, great, and when the sun isn't shining, we don't have any output. So how do we store this energy? So they had 2 lakes. And when they had an excess output of energy, they just had a pump and they pumped the water back up to this lake. So a never-ending loop. Genius.
Yeah, it's a water battery.
16 years to build.
Yeah.
It was an astounding thing of engineering. I was just shocked. But of course, 16 years is a long time. But now, of course, it's there. And it's going to be there for a long, long, long time. And to meet those people working there, and that's the same all over the world, it gives you so much. It just inspires you, because And I was just going to go another thing to mention why doing this. There was I don't know if you remember, there was a survey a couple of years ago that came out. It's in the Western world, part of the world, asking 18 to 25-year-olds how they felt about the future. And in our part of the world, 50% did not believe we were doomed. Why have kids? There's no future. This whole narrative of God, the generation before us, they have ruined the world. And that's why I really feel it's important to change the narrative, because yes, the challenges are enormous. Life is really hard. It's always been really hard.
Yeah.
But we together we can do something. And one of the scariest things is when you find the fear that goes in, and that creates anger. Anger creates the need to find someone to blame for this, and then you create division. We don't need that.
And you did go to some places which are currently at the forefront of climate change. You were in Greenland, you were in Kenya.
Well, we started the show in Greenland, and I wanted to go there because my wife's from Greenland. I've been coming there for a long time, and it's one of those places where you can really see climate change up close. You see the receding glaciers. And then I met this geologist who was, he's just so inspiring. Minik Rosing, one of the greatest in the world. And the reason I wanted to talk to him, because he said, yes, he's Greenlandic. And he was like, I'm a little sick and tired of being that our country, our beautiful country, is kind of the symbol of climate change, of the horrors of climate change. And he said, what if we can change that narrative, and it's also a symbol of the solution? Because what he discovered was the silt, which is the glacier flour that is pushed out, which is, if you look at Europe and you can see there's like a green belt, which is basically where all the food is made in the world, the most fertile soil. And it's basically where the former ice age, where the ice receded. So that's because it left all this silt. So he took some of this silt in Greenland, and you have endless amounts of this because it's been being deposited for 10,000 years. He took it to Africa, and then he spread it out, and it just increased the yield. So imagine doing that, exporting all this, and creating, it's just thinking outside the box, but also it's common sense. How do we fertilize the ground without using all kinds of crap we don't need? Use what nature's giving us.
One of the challenges of telling a story about solutions, we face that as journalists day in and day out, is now that the problem is understood and people want to do something about it, there is an explosion of ideas and money flowing towards the solutions. But what is a solution that is going to work, or what is a solution that's vaporware, is still hard to tell. You can't separate the hype from the reality. And again, choosing you have 3 or 4 big solutions in every episode that you go in, which is a lot to cover in a 6-episode series. What was the thinking behind choosing places that you ended up at?
First of all, we wanted it to be a global show.
Yep.
Because I think it's very important that it doesn't become like, sometimes wherever you live, you think, well, we have all like Europe, we're going to solve this, or North America, or it is a global problem, but we all face the same issues all over the world. Circumstances are different. And then we can inspire and we can help each other. Now, when it comes to transition, away from fossil fuels to renewables, we know we have to do that. That is the most important thing. But we also know that large parts, we talked about Africa before. We went out to a place where it literally is like just the idea of having access to electricity is a dream, which is still out of reach. Those people need to have that.
Yeah,
and
there are about 700 million people in the world.
And then, we have to make sure that it's not, that they are able to choose renewables. But then there's a huge potential in that. I lost my train of thought.
Choosing the solutions. One was
you wanted it to be global. One's global, but also because it's not just about climate change. This is about all these big issues we face, whether it's waste management or it's clean oceans. So we wanted to get as broad a journey as possible. And of course, my core belief is that, what unites us as human beings is far outweighs what divides us. And you saw that everywhere. We all want the same thing in life. We want to take care of our family. We want to have a life that gives meaning. And we want to have a positive impact on the world. And and just to go back to that thing about having, being depressed about the future. As soon as we left Europe, North America did not meet that. We met, all these young people in Africa, there was just so much energy, so much belief that of course we're going to solve these issues. Of course we're going to find a better solution. And that's why we wanted to do this, because it is just, passionate people are inspiring. It's just that simple. And to see that, you have so many different solutions, you have the highest of the high tech, and then you have people that go, hang on a sec, listen, the solution, we already had it. We just forgot about it 200 years ago. Let's just go back in time and redo that.
Yeah, often if I meet a stranger and I describe to them my job and they're like, oh, you write about climate. Must be a depressing job, they say. And I turn around and say, no, I write about solutions, and actually it is quite exciting because there's so many interesting ideas that are coming.
Yeah.
People are making bets. People think they're going to make a ton of money, or people are super passionate. In the trailer it comes through. You had a ton of fun.
Yes.
You went to places and did exciting things. Give us a flavor.
Yeah, I'm a very lucky, everywhere was exciting and amazing. There was a lot of travel. Everything was offset. We offset everything, of course. I was told to remind people of that. But
well, the production, film industry does have a big.
We all do, and we can all do better. But there's the classic. I've never been to the Great Barrier Reef. Dive down and see that incredible thing. For example, my biggest fear. I'm absolutely convinced we're going to solve the CO2 emission within 50 years, and we'll have a completely green. My biggest fear, of course, is the loss of biodiversity. Is that once you lose these species, then
they're gone.
It's going to take a long time for evolution to bring it back. It's not. That is scary, and once, so that whole idea of waste management, it just blew my mind on how far we have yet to go. The challenges are incredible. But yes, I've been to Greenland many times. I still love that. I'd never been to Japan. And we went there both to see a place called the Zero Waste Village, which I recommend to go to. It's very inspiring. But we also wanted to go to Fukushima to experience, my idea was this simple. I was like, yeah, this is perfect. I can show that nature, if given the choice between humans or radioactive disaster, they're better off with radioactive disaster. Very depressing, right?
Yeah.
But that was my idea. And then I took the scientists out and we had put the hazmat suits on. We went out and I said, so if I say that, would you agree with that? He said, it's not that simple. I was so grateful for that, because nothing is that simple, even though we'd like it to be.
Yes.
He said, we've been around for a long time. We are part of the ecosystem. If you take us out of the equation, a lot of species will suffer. We are the main predator. So if we go, all the other predators are going to come. All the small animals are in danger. All things that I didn't even think of. He said it in a much more poetic way than I can. But it was just something about, listen, we are part of it. I was standing, there's a little shot in the trailer. I was in Kenya and in the Masai Mara, and suddenly all these animals started running. It felt like I couldn't believe it. The whole ground was shaking. And what he said, it's called the Nashalai Conservancy. And Nashalai is a word that basically means balance. We have to find balance between, animals and humans. We have to live together. And I think that we're not that stupid that we're going to destroy our home.
Yeah.
We're maybe not as smart as we like to think, and we got carried away, I think, because we can do if humans can imagine it, we can do it, right? So we've been using resources like there was no tomorrow.
Yeah.
But there's a tomorrow.
In terms of being able to make the show, right?
Yes.
People are going to see it, and it's months and months of work that is then distilled into a great episode.
Yes.
But what are behind the scenes things that you've had to do that most people don't know about? What's production life like that is frustrating, is interesting, that traveling to all these countries, managing to meet all these people,
Yeah,
give us a behind-the-scenes look.
Well, I think the craziest thing was when after Africa, I got some kind of weird infection on my leg. And finding myself in Japan going to see a doctor where my leg was oozing yellow, and I was like, I'm going to lose this leg. It was absolutely disgusting. And having 10 nurses around me wrapping up my leg and telling me I was going to be okay was exciting. It was very, very, very good. No, but you've traveled with a tiny crew, right? Right. And then whenever we went to a new country, we'd hire locals. Right. Because there was also part of it, we have to include, also to get better stories. Yeah. As you know, when you do go into post-production, I think the hardest thing is the stuff that you have to leave out. Yeah. And I find that there are so many, we have, which is a good problem, we have at least, we could do one more perfect episode, but that's just the way it is. But that's so much common sense, and that's why I think people will enjoy the show. Right. We know that we have some of the great, amongst us we have scientists that will blow our minds, right? I was, just a little anecdote, a little story, I was in Hamburg in Germany, and we were at this coal power plant that had been decommissioned. It was the newest in Germany, and they're going to turn it into a hydrogen power plant. And I was talking to the guy who was running it, and he'd been working there in that industry for a long time, and he said he remembered just 10, 15 years ago, the wind covered 5% on a good day. And he was like, it's very sweet. It's never going to be enough. Because we were also at the steel industry, like it's so energy heavy. Yeah. And he said, now we're at 50, but now we are actually building hydrogen. We got excess electricity from the wind. And he said, I can't believe it. Yeah. 6 years ago, I was in San Francisco with the UNDP doing this event like this. And one of the big high points of this thing was I was going to go outside, and I was going to get into an electric car, and I was going to drive around the corner. I was only allowed to drive around the corner because it was like, it wasn't ready to go on the roads. It's just 6 years ago. Yeah. And now the most sold cars in Northern Europe anyway are electric. Yeah. I know we all want it to happen faster, the whole transition, but it is happening. And there is real reason for hope. Yeah. And it's not about, I just want to be hopeful because that's so sweet and optimistic, but no, it's because it's based on reality. And I think, of course, as you say, it's difficult to sell the good story. Yes. It's easier to get clicks if you see a headline going, world is burning. Oh God, let me see that. That's exciting.
Fear is a powerful emotion. But people would like.
But I also think that the reason sometimes when you talk about climate change, people go, yeah, I don't want to hear about it, is exactly that. Because why? We've had enough now. Right. We know it's happening. Right. There's no. That's the thing. Now, please tell me.
It is.
It's going to be fine, and it is. We can see the solutions.
It is going to be the story of remaking the world, and this is going to play out over decades to come. You said you could have made an entire episode that you left on the cutting room floor. I feel like I shouldn't leave the audience without finding out what some of those solutions were, which ended up not coming into the show. Is there?
I don't want to disappoint any of the people that I've been visiting, but I also really hope that we'll find other ways to tell these stories in other media because there's we all know, all you guys know here, when you meet it just blows your mind. Okay, just one little thing because I've talked about going back in time with the National, but then I was in Berkeley and this company that been able to copy what plants do, break down CO2 at source. Jesus, it does inspire. And what's most inspiring, everywhere we went, all these companies, workplace...
It takes CO2 and make it into useful things, right?
Yeah. But the workplace, everybody was so happy to do this thing. Right. Even the guy who used to work in coal, I said, what has changed the most since now you're doing hydrogen? He says, it's so much better when we have family dinners. Because I don't get shit from my nieces. But it's just interesting because, although I have to mention one more company, this company called Beta, which is electric planes in Vermont. Yeah. God, that company. That was the coolest place to work. I wanted to join them. Every employee was given a flight certificate because they were worked in aviation.
Yeah, I mean, electric planes, I mean, you talked about a few things that people thought would never become reality, won't scale, but at least they were built. Electric planes are still seen as science fiction, and, of course, there are now billions of dollars being invested to try and make them into reality. I mean, I think the better plane is only a few seats for...
Yeah, but yeah.
But now they're talking about 90-seat electric aircraft.
Listen, listen. We all, I mean, the funny thing is, it's not because the challenges aren't insane. They are.
Yeah.
And we have to work really hard. But I just think the evidence should give us real hope. If you see where we were 50 years ago and where we are today, both good and bad, but clearly we can find ways.
Again, as part of my job, I see many of these solutions, and many of the startups which have been around sometimes a decade and they've got no attention. They are immensely happy that, finally somebody is looking at us and recognizing the work that we've done and the potential that solution has.
But also, it's an interesting thing because I've heard that from investors, that thing you just mentioned, well, we never know which one is going to be the one.
Right.
Which is like the worst reason for not giving it attention. Like, because yes, of course, not everything is going to be, why did Google suddenly be the one that exploded? Why wasn't it some other, what was it called, MySpace?
Yeah.
Now, Facebook. Well, Facebook did again. I'm too old for it. But why is it like we don't know, but we know that it's happening.
Yeah. But many of them are going to be on a TV show for the first time. I mean, we heard in the trailer the woman who was so excited to have Jamie Lannister on her electric motorbike.
Yeah.
Did you get that feeling that people, when you went to a solution?
No, but of course you want to, of course, because there is real passion, and like in Kenya, they're a very, very young company, and making like the biggest form of transportation in Africa and most of Asia is what they call the boda, motorcycles, scooters, and the funny thing was, then they made this incredibly cheap. It was only $1,500 for this bike. And everything was by hand. Like, it was incredible, and they had the order book was out. You just couldn't. It was all about scaling up. That was the problem, right?
I mean, in these places.
But then you traveled. Then I went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And I said I want to go travel around Vietnam. How do I do that? Oh, there's another electric bike company. Electric bike, electric. It's everywhere, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, I grew up in India, and developing countries are very price-sensitive environments. They only pick up a solution if it makes economic sense, if it's cheaper than whatever is available.
Yeah.
It's not really about climate or pollution. It's about, how can I make my life easier and more affordable? The show is going to be out. It'll be running for 6 weeks. The 6 episodes will be done. What next?
Well, first, one thing that is amazing with Bloomberg, and I keep telling Bloomberg, please make people aware of this, because one thing is but the fact that this is free.
Yeah.
You just have to get the Bloomberg Originals app or go to Bloomberg.com.
Yep. Just
watch it. You don't have to pay anything. It's there. So just push that out there, because and it's you follow me, but it's really about the people everywhere. So what was your question? What's next?
What's the next thing you're working on? What's the next project?
Now I'm growing this beautiful mustache. I'm doing a show called King and Conqueror. I'm playing William the Conqueror. So it's I'm back to
back to killing people.
The first king of Britain. Yes, I'm learning a lot of history. History is important.
And with your work with the UNDP.
With the UNDP, well, I mean, that's another thing that I'm trying to persuade them to make more stories about the people and not the fear, because all we have. I mean, I think for human beings, you can take everything away from us, but you cannot isolate us.
Yeah.
If we don't have if we don't have other human beings, we're screwed, right? And sometimes we end up fighting each other for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do a show, I want to just more, it's about people. That's also why I'm an actor, right?
Well, the United Nations Development Program, if you guys have not heard of it, we had his head, the head of UNDP, Achim Steiner, on Bloomberg Green's podcast Zero. It is, we know of UN and its climate bodies, but UNDP is the one that deploys the most capital on climate solutions. And so...
Well, it's the biggest agency in the UN, and it does everything from like supporting digging a hole in a small village to literally nation building. Why a lot of people don't know about them is because they historically cannot take credit, because it's fair enough, it's about they're helping whatever country they're helping, so it's about that local minister taking the credit, which is great.
Yes.
But I also want to give credit to those people working there because they're doing amazing work.
Well, thank you, Nikolai.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
And I'll pass this on now to John Farrar, who's the Senior Executive Editor and Head of Energy and Climate for Bloomberg News.
Seamless. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, thank you for joining us this afternoon. My guest here barely requires an introduction, but I'll do it anyway.
Well, your previous guest
barely
required an introduction. I require an introduction, and I'm impressed if this room can span both conversations. So
well, we'll see
lock
what
the
we
doors
can do.
And
we did have a slightly tortured Game of Thrones climate analogy, winter is coming, etc., but it didn't actually quite work anyway. So Mark is obviously chair of Brookfield Asset Management and head of transition investing. He's also UN Special Envoy for Climate Action. And I should say here, obviously, for full disclosure, chairman of Bloomberg. But it is climate that we want to talk about here today, and specifically the outlook for climate policy making after COP. We have another COP coming up this year, and for climate investment in 2024 and beyond. Before we dig into it, I just want to remind you of the QR code on the screen above me. It should be popping up now in a minute. If you have any questions for Mark, please feed them in, and we'll see them on the screen here. So Mark, we're coming out of COP28, looking ahead to, obviously, we have COP29 coming up later this year. But I want to sort of look back a little bit. COP28 was historic. We saw the commitments from 192 countries to transition away from fossil fuels, commitment to triple renewables investments by 2030, operationalizing the loss and damage fund. And yet we had Al Gore on Bloomberg TV the other day sort of saying he is worried about countries already trying to wiggle out of their commitments. I think we had the Saudi Arabian energy minister talking about some of this is optional or everyone has to find their own path to it. Do you share those concerns that some countries will try to wiggle out of what was agreed?
Well, anytime you have 192 countries, companies, individuals, they're maybe not everyone's going to move at the same pace. You're always going to have those issues. But what is different, and am I allowed to mention Bloomberg in this? It sounded like you prohibited it there. Yeah, I've got the microphone. But one of the things that platforms like Bloomberg do is provide that accountability. So just to be clear, and one of the things we're doing related to COP, when I say we, I mean the UN, is building an accountability mechanism with the very sexy name of Net Zero Data Public Utility. I said it was going to be tough to sustain the previous conversation in this. But the point of that is it is globally available, open source. Everyone can tell what individual bank is doing, individual company, on aggregate versus country, relative to their commitments. That's what's being built up. All the major data providers are part of that, and some of the biggest platforms are providing, the support, so the programming and the code is all there. So I'd say that first thing. The second is that what was useful about this COP, and if I want to go back to what's useful about this COP, is that there was a discipline around the process that was focused on the climate physics. We all know this is about, I think we all know, that this is about the stock of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which is driving climate change, which drives the extreme weather event, and the very human suffering today and tomorrow that we've built up, and it's about arresting that. So what the COP president did was focus on the biggest chunks of emissions that they thought could be addressed in the short term, while also building up those types of 192 country agreements that you referenced, John. And they looked around. I'm going to simplify a bit, but they looked around and said, well, what's one of the biggest is methane. methane, including methane flaring from the oil and gas industry. It's there's different ways to do the calculation because methane has a shorter half-life than other greenhouse gases, but it's basically 5% of emissions. And the president said, well, wait a minute, we know most of the people who do this. It's the major oil companies, it's the major gas companies. We have their phone numbers. We'll call them and we will challenge them to get to zero methane by 2030. And while they're at it, doubling or having the emissions efficiency of their other Scope 1, Scope 2. So that while we're using hydrocarbons, and we're trying to get off them, but while we're using them, it does the least damage as possible. And that is a side deal, if you will, but it's a side deal with almost 50% of global oil and gas production that is signed up to it. You will be able to see who meets that and who doesn't. Not least because of satellite technology, not least because of public disclosure requirements and other aspects. So you get tracking in real time of some of the most impactful aspects. So I think the COP process, we need everything. Climate is a massive and. We need social pressure. We need NGOs. We need intergovernmental agreements. We need companies doing things. We need data so we can track everything. And what this COP did is some of those big ones, but a series of agreements that not everyone signed up to, but those who, enough companies and countries signed up to those that had a short horizon by the end of the decade, and candidly a way that can be tracked who's producing and who isn't. So in those respects, it was good. Last point, and I'm going to put this in some context, which is if everyone does what they said they were going to do.
Big if.
It's a big if. But if everyone does, a third of the gap of the emission reduction that's required between now and 2030 will have been covered by this COP. Now, do not misinterpret that. There will be ones who fall behind. There will be some that outperform. And there's a reason we have to have another COP, and there's a reason why we have to continue to amp up ambition. But that's a pretty good year's work. We need to repeat that this year. We need to repeat it next year.
So is it peer pressure? I mean, it sounds like part of what you're saying is peer pressure will keep people honest.
Peer pressure keeps people honest, but also what's happening is the greater sense of inevitability that accelerates progress. So if this is going to happen, then companies and countries start moving more rapidly because it gives them an advantage. Yeah. That's the lesson. For a long time, for whatever reason, I was a central banker, I was a financial regulator, and after the financial crisis, we put in a bunch of measures that made banks much stronger, cost a lot of money, and so we said, well, you don't have to do it for 7 years. But guess what? All the banks were like, well, I don't want to be the last bank to do it. And the best banks brought it forward because it gave them a competitive advantage. If this were a Bloomberg screen, it would show a share price, a correlation with those who acted early, their share price went well. It's the same with carbon. It is now the same with carbon. So the more that it becomes clear, for example, and this, we may talk about politics later, the more it's clear that you can't sell an internal combustion vehicle in Europe after 2035, the more you want to be in that position early on because you're going to get not just the sales and the expertise, but you get the knock-on financial return. So it's pressure, but it's also financial return.
So let's talk about COP29. Obviously, every year we have a new COP. This year it's about climate finance. I mean, it's always about climate finance, it seems in many ways. But this year it's all going to be about how can we get governments to agree, the rich north, to pledge more money. So we just about heaved ourselves over the line of getting to the $100 billion every year. Now we need to up our ambition. What to you sounds like a gettable target for which countries to agree?
Oh, God. That's a very difficult question. It's the one bit of climate finance that I don't work on for a couple of reasons. One, these are decisions that are taken, on an interstate level, intergovernmental level, not very well. Number two, the process doesn't work very well. Number three, well, it's important, the orders of magnitude, the governmental stuff is important. It's important for climate justice. It's important for certain things that the market, in big quotation marks, won't fund. The orders of magnitude of impact that we can have on the private side, shifting the private side, is much larger. You need both, but it's much larger. And so with respect, from Paris basically from Paris through Glasgow, this COP, some major advances in private finance that have helped move, and I think we should all step back and recognize this, that if we go back to Paris, in the broadest coverage of clean energy investment, green energy, electric vehicles such as there were then, charging infrastructure changes, it was $500 billion a year. It was about $1 trillion of oil and gas infrastructure investment. As you guys track, that is now flipped. It's 1.8 trillion clean last year, a little less than $1 trillion in oil and gas. So it's now almost 2 times as much. Now it needs to keep going, but part of that, a big chunk of that was unlocked by reforms on the private finance side, starting with something as simple as just climate disclosure, which was launched in Paris.
But looking at the amount of, do you think 500 billion, is that going to be too big of an ask? Do you think it is?
What, of governments?
Yeah.
Look, John, you're asking me a question that I'm trying to avoid it. I have zero visibility on what's going to be cut on the government side. And we also have a COP president that was just named literally weeks ago. So it's a very challenging task. What we can't, and those who are tasked with it need to deliver. I'm not absolving them of anything. But it just makes the work on the private finance and the blended finance side, which is blending public money, World Bank money. You have Ajay here. I'm sure
he's speaking tomorrow morning.
He's speaking tomorrow morning. Okay. Well, Ajay will answer all these questions. But taking Ajay's money, if you will, the World Bank's money, and not getting less than $1 of additional money alongside that, but getting $3, $4, $5 for every dollar that the World Bank puts out into the emerging and developing world. That's the prize, and that's what we're as much focused on over the course of the next several months.
Talk to us a little bit about Brazil next year. We had Marina Silva in here last night.
Fantastic.
And, she's already, I think, a world figure, but I think the world is going to be hearing a lot more from her. Incredibly inspirational figure. Working already very closely with the Brazilians ahead of that next year.
Well, I think with no disrespect to the COP process this year, it's important. We've got to get everything we can out of it. But recognizing that Brazil is Brazil, so in and of itself, what happens in Brazil is critical for the climate, first thing. Secondly, they are G20 president this year, so they're driving the agenda in the G20 and obviously COP president next year. And they are very, very ambitious, which is good news. The Ecological Transformation Plan, which I'm sure she spoke to, and we'll all hear a lot more about, is significant in and of itself, but potentially very significant in the respect of it can help create whole new financing flows around biodiversity, around nature, at a scale that's material. Now, notice that everything I said was conditional because a huge amount of work has to be done in order for that to be the case. But that's absolutely the focus. And I really commend the Brazilian government as a whole and the people behind it for the scale of this ambition. So I think what they're doing is as significant, is the most significant thing in climate.
Now I'd like to turn to climate investment. It's been a tricky year. I think if you look at what's happened to onshore and offshore wind around the world. I think the S&P Global Clean Energy Fund was down 24% last year. Obviously, that's the mirror of what the S&P 500 actually did. It's been tough out there. We had Ray Dalio, I think, speaking today in Davos, saying investors want to invest in green. But they're only going to do so if there's a return. So what is your, I guess, elevator pitch to investors who are looking to get into green technologies, green industry, etc.?
Let me put a couple of things, just to put context on it. The world put $1.8 trillion into clean energy last year. 1.8 trillion. Like none of those factoids and the anecdote from Ray, or the words from Ray, who I respect Ray, like there's a massive disconnect between the two. That 1.8 trillion is going to make a very good return. Not every single investment, but the whole thing will make a very good investment. Elevator pitch, funny you should say, I actually do make an elevator pitch for clean energy investment for Brookfield, one of my roles, because we run and have set up one of the early stages, but arguably, I'll just say one of the transition businesses in the world. We have more than 25 gigawatts of clean power in operation. We're a major operator. We have 150 gigawatts in our backlog. We set up a transition fund, the largest transition fund at the time, $15 billion. We deployed all of that, all of that capital effectively within 18 months. We'll make very good returns for our investors. So we deployed it through this, quote, difficult period. And if you care about the climate, which we do, and our investors very much do, and I think by self-selection this room does, that $15 billion takes out the equivalent of emissions of New York, London, and Toronto, I'm Canadian, combined. Okay, that's the order of magnitude of impact. So if you focus on going where emissions are, because you get paid for helping to solve climate change, and that's now the reality, you get paid more for doing that in the advanced world than you do in the developing and emerging world, something we've got to fix with policy and finance. But because you get paid, you can both have a massive impact and make returns for investors. So the elevator pitch now to investors is to the effect of track record there, scale of opportunity elsewhere, and I'll speak maybe more generally. We are looking to and expect to raise more than that significantly.
How much
so that
more?
we can continue. Well,
you had to guess.
I'm trying to remember what we're allowed to disclose at the moment, but we'll watch this space. We'll give guidance, updated guidance with our results.
But we are in a higher interest rate environment compared to where we were 4 or 5 years ago, and obviously we've seen VCs in retreat here and there. Is this something of a buyer's market for Brookfield? Do you see this as an opportunity? Startups.
Okay. So we're talking about different things. So make sure. So what we're doing is deploying wind, solar, storage, some hydrogen at scale, nuclear as well at scale, wherever we can do it. It is there is in a world where that deployment, and I'll use dollar figures, where that deployment got up to 1.8 trillion, as I keep mentioning, and needs to go to 4 to 5 trillion by the end of this decade. If you can do that, it's not quite a buyer's market, it's an investor's market. There's a huge range of opportunity, and we want lots more people to come in and do the same thing because there's just such a range of opportunity. On the climate technology side, I think, we're all familiar with the issues that have happened in VC. It is a better investing market in VC in general than it would have been at the height of the hype and the low interest rate environment. It is, I think, increasingly clear which technologies will be critical. Not all of them. Somebody will come up with something new. Which technologies are critical, and the rough timeline of deployment of those technologies. And because of industrial policy, centered in the U.S. but elsewhere, the timing of the returns for those has come forward. So that's, I'll be more specific, that's clear on hydrogen, it's clear on carbon capture and storage, it's less clear on direct air capture, but there's still opportunities there.
We are running low on time. I do want to talk to you about politics. I think we have 40% of the world's democracies voting this year, elections all over the world. We saw what happened in Iowa the other night. We've seen, in the UK, some rollback on net zero, problems in Germany, elsewhere. In this election environment, what is your message to sort of progressive climate politicians who are battling the populism, battling the disinformation around climate? Because it just feels like, the anti-net zero bandwagon is getting momentum.
Well, I think the first thing is remember why you got into politics and why you're doing it is to serve people. And if the people you're serving are worried about and suffering under the cost of living, they're worried about their the immediate cost of living crises that exist in many of our countries, worried about their jobs, worried about overall resilience and security, the first thing you have to be dealing with is to address those issues. So you've got to serve the voters, and alongside that, you have to be able to do more than one thing at one time, but you have to start with the immediate. Alongside that, I think if you're going to be in a position of authority in any of our economies, recognizing that the importance of the overall issue, but also the importance of being competitive, to use that brutal word, but it will be increasingly brutal from a competition perspective, competitive in climate. All aspects related to climate. So where is Canada going to be competitive in the auto sector? Are we still going to be a competitive auto producer or manufacturing writ large? If we're going to be that, we need a net zero grid, plain and simple. And we need to grow that grid probably by 50%. And so we need to do that in a way that's smart, and that's going to give the returns to the people whose costs you get down, whose housing you provide, but also are going to want a job 2-3 years down the road. So deliver today. Let me flip it another way around, which is that if you look at another country I'm familiar with, I haven't looked at the manifestos as they call them in the UK. I guess they're not out, but what is one of the biggest issues in climate in the UK? It's the housing stock. It is one of the worst housing stocks from a simple insulation perspective, climate efficiency. Well, so designing a climate strategy that helps address that, because it's immediate jobs, it's immediate cost of living, it covers the country as a whole. You need to do it. There's ways to do it through a very sophisticated UK financial system that it leverages the mortgage, I won't get into all the details, but leverages the mortgage market. So you can have an immediate impact, you can get costs off people's bills, you can credibly deliver that, you deliver a bunch of jobs, it's tangible, it's not abstract, and so it's thinking in those terms alongside the UK's hydrogen strategy, which the UK has a hydrogen strategy, and will whatever party wins the next election is going to, I think, will want to follow through on.
Are you disappointed at what we've seen in the UK, the sort of the slowdown on the?
Well, I think I have a basic view on this, which, look, the UK has one of the most sophisticated frameworks, to use that term, for climate, because you know exactly how the country is doing, because an independent commission looks at the existing policies relative to the objectives, shows the gap, and then gives options for how to close the gap in the political system. So supposed to come up with those. If you change something in that system, in my view, you should replace it with something better. So if you decide, as the government did, that the UK is not going to have the moratorium on internal combustion vehicles in 2030, but it'll be 2035, well, the simple question should be, okay, well, what are you replacing that with? Well, you could replace it with something on the housing side, as I just referenced, or some other policy that is going to adjust for the carbon that is going to otherwise be emitted over that period of time. And there's lots of options to do that. And the political process always should come up with better ideas, better ways of getting there, but subject to that discipline. And what I didn't like, at least what it looked like to me, is that policies were being taken off the table certainly without replacements being put in, and they were being done for purely political signaling purposes. That's what it appeared. And that is not the right environment to keep investment focused and flowing as much as it should. And it's also, it's just not good climate policy, my judgment.
Mark, we are out of time. We keep on going for a long time. Just a message to the room. So we have the Green Party at between 6:30 and 8:30. We would love you to stay for that. We're going to rearrange the room a little bit, but we will see you back here. And Mark, I think you're going to join us a little bit as well.
I'll join for that. Well, for the Green, politics and the Green Party. There you go, right
there. There we go, yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers.
Oh, you had I was wondering.
nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Usually I put something on TV, so we never think about you and me. But today I see our reflections clearly in Hollywood, laying on the screen. You just need a better life than this. You need something I can never give. Fake water all across the road. It's gone now, the night is come. But sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. You can't fight it, you can't breathe. You say something so loving, but now I gotta let you go. You'll be better off in someone new. I don't wanna be alone. You know it hurts me too. You look so broken when you cry. One more and then I say goodbye. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. I just wanna know what you're dreaming of. When you sleep and smile so comfortable. I just wish that I could